Hi everyone, this is your Entrep Guru, Avinash Ramsabag, and today we're going to take a look at the process of generating ideas. In so doing, we will take a look at the definition of idea generation. We're going to take a look at some of the key considerations and also the methods of generating ideas. Idea generation in the entrepreneurial process, it refers to the initial phase. So it's the first phase where entrepreneurs, they actively seek to conceive and develop potential business concepts or solutions to address a specific need or a problem. So it's the first step that we are engaged in, and it is exactly focused on that problem that we are trying to solve. We now take a look at our key considerations. So the first thing that we have to take a look at is that idea generation involves a creative process. So what it means here is that the entrepreneur will take a look at various sources, such as their personal experiences, market trends, technological advancements, customer feedback, because what they're trying to do, they're trying to draw upon these in order to try and figure out what it is that they need to solve. They are also taking a look at the fact that it is diverse sources of inspiration. So it does not only look at one area. It can come from a number of different areas. So it could take a look at what it is the entrepreneur themselves have noticed from observation. It can take a look at what they have seen as gaps in the market. It can also look at emerging technologies, even in terms of the entrepreneur's interests or hobbies. It also takes a look at the vision and the perspectives of the entrepreneur themselves. So the vision of the entrepreneur will drive the idea generation that is taking place. It is also problem solving oriented. So therefore it is that the entrepreneur will therefore look for some form of a problem that they are trying to solve. And it can be a problem that society faces. It could be something that customers have indicated that they are facing. It could be something where they see society might have an issue as a whole, and they might be trying to assist with regards to that. We also look at the whole idea of what is a pain point too. So you might see customers are indicating that they have certain pain points, meaning that there are some issues that they are facing that they feel that it could be solved. For example, a pain point for us might be traffic. A pain point for us might be, we have a product that we want and we cannot get access to it, right? And the entrepreneur might be able to figure out exactly how that can happen. The idea generation is also market focused, and therefore it can be based on things such as research, right? So the entrepreneur can take a look at exactly what customers want. It's also based on flexibility and adaptability. What it means, therefore, is that idea generation is not a one-time event. It is constantly happening. And because it is that entrepreneurs are ones who always try to seek change and growth and stuff like that, what you would find is that the entrepreneur is someone who always is looking to generate more and more ideas. Entrepreneurs also face risk and uncertainty. And because of that, what you would see is that anytime an idea is generated, you have to make sure and assess these ideas properly to make sure that your risks that you take when you generate ideas are calculated risks and not extreme. Ideas also help you to differentiate yourself from other persons, and therefore it helps you to set yourself apart from everyone else. Ideas are also subject to validation and testing. So what it means is that sometimes it is that you may have an idea and you will have to conduct some form of a market research, or you may create a prototype for persons that may actually test your product or your potential product to see if it is actually worthwhile on the market. Idea generation must also align with regards to your resources and expertise, because sometimes you can generate ideas, but the resources don't exist for you to actually turn that idea into a business itself. So you have to make sure that there are the resources that are necessary for you to actually develop that. You also have to take a look at ethical considerations. Sometimes what may happen is that the ideas that may be generated may go against ethical norms. All right, and therefore you may have to look at other areas. We move on to the methods of generating ideas, and please note that there are many of them. And what I decided to do was take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of them also, so that we will have a better idea in terms of, the best use for these types of methods. So the first one that we will come across is brainstorming. And I want to make it very clear, brainstorming is actually done in a group. It is not done on an individual basis. All right, brainstorming is done in a group. If it is that we are talking about brainstorming from an individual point of view, then the term that we use for that is referred to as ideation. But this one here with brainstorming, what we are looking at is where a group of people will come together, and you try to make sure that group is diverse in nature, because you want to get as much of a diverse perspective as possible. And what we try to do is try to make sure that in brainstorming, persons are allowed to throw out as much ideas as possible without any form of criticism. What that allows is for that storming process to take place, for persons to just throw out ideas, right? And because the moment you start to criticize, persons may not want to throw out more ideas. There must be somebody trying to record some of these, not some, but all of these ideas, so that it can be evaluated later on. The advantages of brainstorming is that you get a diverse perspective from everyone. It encourages creativity because persons are thinking freely. It stimulates engagement and participation because persons are not they're not thinking that their idea will be put down in any way. And it also encourages rapid idea generation, because again, this is where the storming process comes in. It also breaks mental barriers, because again, you are not putting up any blocks. You are trying to make sure that there are no blocks in place. And also it enhances problem solving skills, because again, in this case here, persons are free to contribute. And it also fosters team building, because there's a greater sense of appreciation from everyone. The issue here is that there is a potential for groupthink, meaning that sometimes some persons may try to develop ideas that kind of fits in with what everybody else is thinking. So if I'm hearing somebody is going a certain route, I may try to continue in that route to make sure that I don't I'm not different from everybody else. Also, what can happen is that one dominant voice can take over, and therefore what can happen is that sometimes the quieter persons, they may not want to contribute as much. So we have to be very careful to make sure that we get it from everyone else. There can also be social pressure, again, for persons to conform. There can also be another issue here in terms of a lack of focus, because sometimes, because we don't try to disturb the storming process, sometimes you can go off track. It can be a bit much in terms of evaluation and implementation, because sometimes it is that you have to be able to go through all of these ideas, and because of that, it can also be time consuming. And also, brainstorming is not suitable for all situations. Not everything is something that you can actually brainstorm for. You may need people with more expertise, or time constraints may force you to go into another direction. The other one that we can take a look at is also referred to as a focus group. And this one, it's a small group of individuals that you will be basically asking pointed questions towards. And in this case here, what we use it for is more qualitative research. So you may get persons to try a product and let you know what they think about it. You may get persons to examine a company logo and see what they think about it. So there are many different ways in which it can be used. The advantages of a focus group is that you can get really in-depth insights into your area of research, And in this case here, the qualitative data, it can give you some really rich feedback, so that you will be able to get a better idea of how customers may think. You may be able to get an idea in terms of how to maybe shape the 4Ps of your marketing strategies. You get real-time feedback too from customers, so you can see how persons may react directly to your product. And also, you get a chance here to observe group dynamics to see how persons may respond. The disadvantages, though, is that the sample size may not be representative of the larger population. You can also have potential bias. So in this case now, depending on how the moderator asks questions and stuff like that, or depending on the group, how they actually interact with each other, you may actually see that they may respond in similar manners to each other, or they may respond in a manner where they don't want to offend the moderator. So you have to be very careful in that. And what you will also find is that focus groups are also costly, and they may take up a bit of time to do. We move on to the checklist method. And the checklist method, it is a systematic way in which we try to manage and track data. And what happens here is that we are looking at creating a list of essential things that must be followed through with regards to our idea. So for example, our idea should meet certain criteria. And if it is that it does not meet that criteria, then it should not be considered. Some of the advantages of this is that we are looking at organization and structure. So if it is that we follow this, it is a little, we are basically developing a framework to follow. And if it is that we develop the criteria, then afterwards it helps us a little bit more in terms of keeping on track. So it makes it more efficient, obviously, in that case, because again, in terms of timing and stuff like that, we are able to keep on the most important areas that we need to look at. It reduces oversight so that we wouldn't forget certain things. It ensures that your evaluation is comprehensive, and it also improves your decision making, again, because you have a checklist to follow. The disadvantages of this, though, is that it is a bit rigid, because if it is that you stick to the checklist, sometimes there might be some things that you don't look at. And in that case, you can actually miss out on some really good ideas. And because of that, you have that risk of overlooking those unique ideas or novel ideas. You also depend on the quality of the checklist, because sometimes it is that you may develop certain criteria that really and truly may not be considered to be really good criteria. So you have to be very careful with it. There is a potential for confirmation bias, meaning, for example, if it is that I say that the idea needs to be cost effective, and I might turn and look at the idea and say, yeah, I think it's cost effective, and therefore, in my view, I think of it like that. Or I say there has to be a large enough demand for this idea. And then afterwards, I look at it and say, I really think so, rather than looking at real data to see if it is that it will make sense or not. There is complexity with regards to some of the areas in the checklist, so you have to be very careful with it. And you always have to remember, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and because of that, sometimes a checklist may not be effective. We move on to the next one, and that one is problem inventory analysis. And this one, we are looking at where individuals, they may operate in a manner that is similar to a focus group, right? However, instead of generating new ideas, there is a panel that they will provide you with a list of problems. They will be provided with a list of problems, and then they will be asked to discuss each of these problems. And in this case now, what they will be looking at is how could they try and resolve these problems, and it can help them develop a new idea in that process. So the advantages of this is that it is targeted at the problem itself, and in that case now it helps you develop solutions to that. So it is more customer centric because it is looking at the pain points of customers. It helps in terms of the market demand alignment because again you are looking at specifically what are those problems that the customer is looking at. It is used as a catalyst for innovation because again you are looking at specifically what customers have identified. It is also looking at enhancing customer loyalty also, and because of that it will give you a competitive advantage and also a reduced risk of failure. In terms of the disadvantages, it is limited in scope because you are looking at exactly you may limit the range of ideas that can be generated because it is only looking at the problems itself. It is also assuming that the problems that the customers have indicated are valid. Sometimes it is that it may not be valid. So we have to be very careful. You also have to look at blind spots. And what that is looking at is that sometimes it is that because we are focusing on certain problems, it may make us actually miss on some other important areas that need to be resolved. You can also have an overemphasis on incremental innovation, and because of that, what you would find is that there will be slight improvements all the time, but no big innovations, nothing that may be changing the company in any big way or changing the market in any big way. So we have to make sure that we are careful when it comes to those things, because what will happen is that you just continuously improve, right, gradually, but at the same time you may not be a game changer, right? You also have to be very careful in terms of complexity, in terms of your prioritization. Which problem is most important to be addressed first? So you have to be very careful. Sometimes customers may identify something that may not be as important. And again, you are dependent on accurate problem identification. Sometimes it is that you may not narrow in on exactly what the problem is, and it can actually be a source of a problem. We move on to scenario thinking. And with scenario thinking, what we are looking at is that we are looking at different future scenarios that can arise, and we are developing ideas to meet those different scenarios. So what can happen is that you can look at, for example, let's say we are looking at a possible boom in the economy, and therefore what is a possible idea that we can generate, or a product that we could generate to maybe maximize profits from this boom. And then afterwards we can look at, let's say the boom doesn't necessarily happen, what could be the alternative strategies that can happen? All right, so some advantages of scenario thinking is that it helps you are more proactive rather than reactive. So you are more prepared for different scenarios that may occur. It helps you improve decision making because of this, and it encourages strategic thinking because you are looking at a bigger picture. It promotes adaptability because in this case now you are looking to change based on the different scenarios that may occur, and because of that you do have better risk mitigation strategies. And it also fosters innovation because of the fact that you are looking to change specifically based on multiple future scenarios. And also it helps in terms of communication and collaboration because there is a structure to how you are going to change based on the potential scenarios. Move on to the disadvantages of scenario thinking. And with regards to this, it is very much resource intensive because of the fact that we cater for different scenarios, and therefore each scenario may require different resources. We also need to make sure that we understand that scenario thinking is not foolproof. So no matter how well organized that you think you are, there can be some unexpected situations that occur. There can be an overemphasis also on complexity, because you can actually lead here to sometimes too complex plans. All right. There is also potential for bias, and therefore you yourself might decide that certain scenarios fit, or certain plans, fit certain scenarios, when really and truly it may not. You also have to understand that scenario thinking is more qualitative in nature, and therefore it does not provide quantitative predictions. There may be also a lack of consensus from different stakeholders, and therefore they may decide that certain things may be better than what you may think. And also, it may not address short-term issues. So short scenario thinking may be long-term in nature. We move on now to the notebook method. And in this case, what it refers to is a systematic approach in terms of developing your thoughts or ideas. Now, what happens in this case is that it is always advised that if you have ideas, put it down into a notebook. And we refer to this sometimes as idea journals. And what happens is that you note it one time, and then afterwards, as time goes by, what you should do is that you can come back to it and add structure and organize it a little better. All right, so that you can turn that idea into something that can eventually be turned into a concept itself. The advantages of the notebook method is that you can capture ideas very well, and you always provide yourself with enough space, and also it provides you a time also for you to come back now and actually turn this into an opportunity. It also helps you organize everything in a systematic manner, and you can also do things such as sketches to visualize the idea a little better. It is also a tangible record, because in most cases it's advised that you keep a physical notebook. However, obviously in this digital age, sometimes it is that persons will actually do it online. It can reduce for those that keep it physically, it reduces the digital distractions that some persons may have, and you can customize it to suit you, and it also is private to you. The disadvantages, though, if it is that you keep a physical copy or even online, there is a risk of loss of damage. There can be limited accessibility, especially if it's physical again, because what may happen is that you may have it in another place. It's also that if it is that you keep that physical copy, it's not something that you can do a search. You will have to go and look and see where your ideas are, and then afterwards try to add some form of structure to it. There is a lack of collaboration features with that physical notebook too, and because of that, there's also limited space. And this is one thing that I also have problems with, is handwriting legibility. Sometimes you may write certain things, and then you may not be able to interpret what it is that you have found. And you also have to know that obviously the digital alternatives will give you more functionality. We also have reverse brainstorming, and this one, it's very much similar to brainstorming, but instead of you trying to solve a problem, what you're looking at is what can make the problem worse. How could you worsen the problem? And why is that so important is that if you look at how could you make the problem worse, then you can see, okay, if it is that I solve this problem, what can happen? Or if this problem gets worse, it's a little more proactive in nature, because you can see, what is the next step that you can go to make the solution to this problem even better. The advantages of this is that it is a creative perspective shift, because it encourages you to think in a different way, and therefore it leads to a lot better ideas coming out, and it overcomes some mental blocks, so it can reduce those blocks that could hinder the traditional brainstorming sessions. It stimulates more creativity and it encourages you to take a little more risk because of the fact that you are looking a little beyond just the problem itself. It encourages you to explore angles that you did not explore before, and it engages a little more of a diverse perspective. The disadvantages, though, is that it can be very challenging to execute because we're accustomed thinking in a certain way, and then now we have to think about not how to solve but how to make it worse. Sometimes too it can create some very absurd ideas. Sometimes you may think too far out of the box, and therefore the ideas can become very unreal or impractical. It can be time consuming also, obviously, and it requires the facilitator, whoever is in charge of this, to be very skilled in what it is that they're doing. It can also decrease person's morale because it could be a bit frustrating, right? Always looking at the negative or what can make things worse from this. We move on now to the Delphi method, and Delphi involves using a panel of experts, and in this case it will be experts who are external to the business, and they will be asked a set of pointed questions. Now, these experts don't interact with each other, but there is a moderator who's in charge, and that person has to be very skilled in what it is that they are doing. And this, they will be asked a set of questions, and then afterwards, this will be compiled, and then the moderator will evaluate it, come to conclusions based on it, and it will be sent back to these experts to reconsider. Now, the whole point of it is that will take place in rounds until eventually the whole point is that the moderator is supposed to get them to come to a consensus. Now, obviously, as you will imagine, this may be a bit difficult in terms of doing. However, once it is done, though, it can achieve some great success. The advantages of this is that there is reduced bias because, as I said, these experts, they don't interact with each other, and then therefore, because of that, the ability to have groupthink is not there. It incorporates a diverse range of perspectives, obviously, and also it is flexible because it can incorporate a wide range of different areas or topics, and it involves the utilization of expertise in the area. And because these panelists don't have to be in the same spot, it can be remote in terms of their collaboration, so therefore you can find persons from all over the world interacting with each other. The disadvantages of Delphi, though, is that it can be very intensive on your resources, and therefore it can be very much time consuming. As I said, the whole point is that you need to get everybody to come to a consensus, and because of that, it can be very difficult. There is the potential for attrition because what can happen is that, obviously, because of the fact that it will take a while, persons may decide that they are going to drop out eventually. So you have to try and make sure, again, as I said, the facilitator really has to be someone who is skilled. There is a lack of face-to-face interaction, and in that case now, it can be a disadvantage. There is difficulty in terms of handling complex interactions because arriving at a consensus may be very difficult. And then you also have to be dependent on that selection process. So did you select the right panel? That's something that you always have to ask yourself. We move on to the Gordon method. And with the Gordon method, what happens in this case here is that persons are encouraged to engage in creative thinking. They are encouraged to brainstorm and stuff like that. But what happens in this case is that participants are not aware of what the problem is. Imagine you are called to figure out solutions to a problem, but you don't know what the problem is. And that's what the Gordon method involves. So what will happen is that persons will wear different hats, and one of them will be looking at what are the issues, the negative issues that a product may have. One would look at the positives of the product, and then others may look at generating ideas to solve problems with regards to the product. But it all happens in stages, and it depends on the hats that persons are wearing. The advantages of the Gordon method is that there is a diverse exploration. So it encourages the entrepreneur to view the business from multiple angles. And as I said, it depends on the hat that the person wears. As you would see here, there's a green hat, a yellow hat, a black hat, right? In this case, there's balanced decision making. There's also enhanced creativity, because in this case now, persons are forced to think about issues that they are seeing happening and then afterwards try to solve it. And also there's a structured discussion based on the different phases of this process. The disadvantages of the Gordon method is that it can be time consuming, because again, it can prolong the discussion that is taking place. There can be an overemphasis on structured thinking, and therefore sometimes you may not get many out-of-the-box solutions. Now, out-of-the-box solutions can be very important because it can set you apart from your competitors, and it's also heavily dependent on who is facilitating it. We move on now to force field analysis, and this one was developed by Kurt Lewin, who is known for change management. And force field analysis has been applied to idea generation in a manner where it examines factors that are pushing for change from an organization and factors that are resisting change from the organization. Now, what happens in this case is that you may find that customers are pushing for a new product. However, the cost of developing a new product may be a lot. But what happened, what has been adapted from Kurt Lewin is that they are saying that we are supposed to rank and assign a numerical value to those factors that are pushing for change, and also take a look at the values for factors that are resisting that change. And then afterwards, the ones that are carrying the higher rating is what will guide how change takes place or how ideas are developed in the organization. So based on this now, in terms of what is pushing for and resisting change, you can develop new ideas. So we look at the advantages of this, and what it looks at is that it is a structured analysis, taking a look at, obviously in this case, all of those factors involved and making informed decisions based on that. Now, in this case, you do a visual representation where you would actually look at those push factors and also the factors that may resist change, and then afterwards assign values to them. It encourages persons to discuss on those points and also focus on action on how to resolve it. The disadvantages is that it can be subjective, because the scores that you can assign, it may be based on personal bias. So for example, persons may say, you know what, customers really want us to change the color of this product, and you may and therefore you may assign a larger value to that based on compared to anything else. So you have to be very careful in terms of being subjective. There's also a quantitative limitation, because the scoring system might not capture qualitative information. There is a dynamic nature of things, because things can change over time, and it does not account for that. And it also does not account for any unforeseen factors, such as shifts in the market. We also have trees, pronounced trees. And in this case here, we are looking at the theory of inventive problem solving. So in this case, we are looking to try and solve problems, but it is more complex in nature. So we may look at identifying contradictions in a system. For example, wanting a product to move faster, but at the same time having it cheaper. So when we think about cell phones, we want cell phones to be able to have a faster processing speed, but at the same time, we don't want to pay too much for the cell phones. So in this case, now what we will find is that there's a contradiction. We want efficiency, but yet we want a cheaper price. So in this case, we may have to look at how we engineer that product. And therefore, we have different principles in terms of how we may try to resolve those issues in terms of contradictions. So trees is based on an analysis of over 40,000 patents to discover patterns of successful innovation. So it is very much based on a set system and trying to develop things based on it. The advantages of trees is that it has led to accelerated innovation. So it helps you to create innovative and creative solutions more efficiently and effectively. It also reduces the risk of failure because it is based on a systematic evaluation and also based on proven concepts. It optimizes your resources, so trees, it can lead to solutions that are more resource efficient, again based on proven concepts, and it also enhances problem-solving skills. The disadvantages of trees is that it is more of a sophisticated methodology. It requires more training, and as I said, it is more used with regards to engineering and stuff like that. So what tends to happen is that you really need some more qualified persons with regards to it. It is not always intuitive. Sometimes it is counterintuitive. So it can actually go against the norm. It can overemphasize too many technical solutions. Again, as I said, you always have that potential for over-engineering happening in this case. We move on to rapid prototyping. And in this case here, what we are looking at is a simplified version of that product that you are thinking of generating. Now, in that case we look at what we call a minimum viable product at least, and then afterwards it can be tested on the market, and then improvements can be made or we can take away from it also. The advantages of it is that it leads to accelerated learning because you can actually see real-world interactions for the product. There is a reduced risk because in this case now, you can identify potential flaws one time with regards to the product. Persons are able to actually see that product too. And because of that, it is a little more customer-centric. So in that case, now persons are actually able to interact with the product, see what it is like and stuff like that. And in the long run, it is actually a bit more cost-efficient. The disadvantages of rapid prototyping, though, is that with that prototype, you may get limited functionality. So it's usually a more simplified version of the product, and therefore, sometimes it is persons may not see the full potential of it. It can be time-consuming to actually develop a full-scale prototype. It can also be resource-intensive because of the fact that a prototype still requires resources to start up, and usually a prototype is to develop it is much more expensive than actually developing that final product itself. There's also potential for misinterpretation. Sometimes people may misinterpret the purpose of a product, and also there can be an overemphasis on the aesthetics of a product and sometimes not the functionality of it. We move on now to free association, and in this case we are trying to develop ideas based on words that may pop up, and it is more like a brainstorming process. So if anybody has ever done a concept map before, that is very much similar to free association. So for example, if I turn and I say business and I come up with restaurant, cinema, clothing and stuff like that, and then afterwards, let's say I narrow into clothing and I decide, okay, am I going to look at work clothes? Am I going to look at clothes to socialize with? Am I going, what exactly am I looking at? And then based on that, I can narrow down as time goes on. So in this case now, free association, it helps in terms of a brainstorming technique, but at the same time, you actually use a model similar to that of a concept map. In this case, it leads to uninhibited creativity because it liberates your mind. It allows you to try and think of different ideas based on the prompt that you are seeing. You also have that diverse range of ideas, and it encourages brainstorming, as I said before. The disadvantages, though, is that it can lead to a lack of focus, right? So sometimes it is that you can actually be a little too broad in terms of what you're talking about, or you may go off course. It can also be time consuming, because sometimes you can have too many ideas popping up, and therefore you may go into too many different areas, and also you may overlook the practicality of a situation. So sometimes it could lead to impractical ideas that may be difficult to execute. So this is the end of my presentation. Please let me know if it was helpful to you. So thank you very much, and don't forget to like and subscribe at the Entrep Guru or at Entrep Guru on Instagram or on YouTube. Take care. Bye.